Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gamers Gambit, the show where a bunch of us nerdy ass YouTubers talk about all things gaming. And yes, I'm always going to do this in a West Country accent before you you
Good.
ask. Here we are. I'm Don Hayes. Joining us is the illustrious Killjoy, who is my friend and co-host, and also joining us as a recurring guest is Greg from Egregious Games. How's it going, fella?
Good. How are you?
All good, thank you very much. Very good. I've decided to change my background so it's like a natural background this time. I
What
felt a
was it
little bit
last time?
left out last time.
Oh,
Just me and my invisible border.
yeah, that's true. That is true. For anyone wondering why I was turning, then one of my cats creeped away, and I didn't notice. I'm very impressed. But yes, hello, ladies and gentlemen of the interwebs, and welcome back. Well, we got a fun, thrilled, frolic show for you today, and I must say I'm very much looking forward to this one. Words, right? What we talking about? What we talking about today? Then you may ask. I know that's what you're thinking, and you've seen the title of that video because everyone sees the title before they click. We're talking about video game launches and post-game patching, and kind of our thoughts on these things as a whole, and we'll obviously jump into nitty-gritty. Hopefully, these two have examples of good and bad. If not, I have a few good examples of good and bad games with launches and things that have improved over time. So, without any further ado, let's crack on. And I want to start with just a nice general question for you both. I'm going to start with you, Greg, and then I'll come to you, Jack. What is your feelings, either positive, negative, when it comes to a video game launch? And generally, like when you play a game on launch day or whenever you play that game, but probably mostly on launch day in this particular instance, if you have a subpar experience, are you quite hard, like, no, this is not acceptable in this day and age? Or are you more the kind of person that's like, I can kind of see how it goes, are you that patient kind of be like, oh, this will get better in time?
I'll start, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm fairly harsh, though. I think I'm not as harsh relative to you, because you will never give a game another chance. Whereas if a game is shit, I'm not going to play it. But if 6 months down the line or a year down the line, people are saying, "Hey, you should give this game a go again. It's pretty good," I'll be like, "Okay, sure." If I liked it enough the first time around that I think it's got promise and it could be fixed with patches, then sure.
Yeah, it seems reasonable. Jack?
Um, Relatively similar. If the game is, it depends on how good the game is at launch. If it is literally like this game doesn't run, it's just horrific, full of bugs, then I probably won't give the game another chance. To be honest, they've almost had their one crack at a launch, and it is a big part for me about that experience. If I've had like a mired experience, I'm unlikely to go back. That being said, I think like Greg kind of alluded to, if there's promise, there are certain games you play like this game with a little bit of refinement could be fantastic or great. I'd probably give that game a whirl in a year or two's time. The other thing that would draw me back is like an expansion or something that catches my attention. And even a game that has a really bad start, if it has something that really draws me in and, they turn it around, then there's an opportunity that I might look at it again. But it's not a done deal, but it is an important part of that whole experience for me.
Yeah, it's not just black and white. There is grey in there, but I guess as Greg was alluding to, like, I am of the opinion that especially when it comes to big first party, AAA games, when you have these big companies that are funding a game, that when that game comes out, if that game is in a state that is not up to par, then like, why should I then give that game another go later down the line? Like, if they can't do it right the first time with the 3 to 5 year, let's say 3 to 5 year time to make the game and then release it, and it comes out in a state that's like either buggy or doesn't run well, or all these different things, or like lack of content is another one. Why should I then come back later on? And now I can't think of many games that I've seen or wanted to play where I've played early on and then come back to them. To be honest, I can't think of any games right now. But I do know there are some. I have examples as we go through this of things that were good examples that came out well and have gotten better, and examples of games that came out bad and are just why would I ever put my time into that? But I think like there has to be a transparency with the developers as well. If a developer comes out, releases a shoddy product, and they're like, right, this is what we're gonna fix, like they're held accountable for it, and they're gonna fix it, then sure, maybe because you've admitted that you fucked up, I'm gonna have more chance coming back. But it really depends on what your product is in the first place. We'll start naming games in a minute, I'm sure, but like right now there are a couple where I'm like, I still want to play this game, and I haven't, and I'm still waiting for that game to be in a really good state before I play it, because first impressions on a video game are everything. If you play a game and you pick it up on launch and it just runs badly and crashes, or like there's just myriads and myriads of issues, you've destroyed that person's first impressions. It's unlikely that person's going to be kind enough to come back to your game. It can happen, obviously, but it is I would say it's a lot less likely. But yeah,
certainly not if the player is Levi.
Yeah, I mean, where I stand on it is just a case of that. You have to earn my time. If there's 10 other games I could be playing that are like fucking amazing, why am I going to come back to your game? And I think that's really important. Like, it's really to be aware that like if you have interest in a product and in this game and it is in a bad place, and then they fix it and it does get better, have you moved on to other things? Are you prepared to give that game its time? And you trusted these people to make a game. They were like, here's all the promises, and what they delivered on launch was a pile of poo, essentially. It's like, to get someone to come back to that, you really need. I think word of mouth is massive. I think word of mouth. If you've got friends that are jumped in later to a game, then that can really be like, all right, well, I will give it another go. But especially when it's an upfront price and the way games are now, if it's free to play, I guess it's like, well, it's free to play. I can install it and play it. But when it comes to a game that's like 50, 60 quid up front and you have a bad experience, that just leaves a sour taste in my mouth. Like, if I've refunded that game, I'm not coming back. Like, it's just not going to happen. So that's kind of where I stand on it. I'm quite harsh when it comes to these things, but, whether that be any of the big companies that we all know, and even the slightly smaller ones, but I'm not like indie games is kind of a weird one. Like, there are going to be some weird issues there, but then that's usually because the indie games have probably overshot what they're capable of. So I'm a little bit more lenient with that. But like when it comes to these big budget games, I think you have to hold them to account. And yeah, so that's kind of like my thoughts on it. What I wanted to do was to go around both of you. We'll start with like positive experiences you've had, and then we'll go on to like either negative games that you've never gone back to. But starting with you, Greg, what games have you played that you feel have gotten significantly better since launch? I don't know, you might have one example, two examples, but if you want to share those with us.
See, I could go into Final Fantasy 14, but when I played it, it was already good. So that's not necessarily the best example. There's not a lot of... I think the best example of a game that I could say I really wasn't interested in when it came out, and then later on played a shit ton of it, was Diablo 3. I just wasn't that interested in it at launch. I was interested in some of the systems. I'm actually a supporter of a lot of the changes they've made towards experimenting with your skills and coming up with these cool like runes that you attach. You get runes on your runes, so you can do this stuff. It's just that at launch they had some serious problems with itemization, with the fact that they'd approached it trying to make it into like the way Blizzard had been going, and it is towards like we're not going to make single player games anymore. We want to make live service games. We want to make things we can monetize. And to that end, Diablo 3 had the auction house, which was famously stripped out because it ruined the game. And I just kind of didn't buy into the hype. I only bought into it when I heard it had gotten good. A year later, I was like, okay, the first expansion's out, and they've stripped everything out, and people are saying that this is way better. The whole Reapers of Souls expansion is way better. And I went in, and I loved it, and I still love that game. Another great game. I wouldn't have called it bad at launch. I went into this a lot in my article on my website and in my first video here is Total War. It's just that when I play Total War Warhammer 2 now, I couldn't go back and play the first game because it's just so janky by comparison. And they're functionally the same game. They're the same games in a trilogy of games. So this is something I find really interesting because it's something you can't do with most single player games. Most single player games, they get one chance to be. Total War Warhammer was, from the start, they said it's going to be a trilogy, and I thought, oh, it's going to be like The Hobbit. They're dragging these things out to make more money. But it's really an opportunity for them to go back and be able to refine the whole formula with each new game. So it's kind of a special example there.
I like both of those examples. Both of them I can definitely concur with. A couple I would add to that, probably Civ 6 is a game that has...
That was on my list, yeah.
Was it? It's just one of those games that just got better with time. They just added more and more content to it. And yeah, it just grew. And that was a game that I enjoyed on launch, and they just added to it and just made it, in my opinion, the sort of turn-based game, strategy game. That there's no game that's as good as that in that genre, in my opinion. There are games that are coming out now, like Old World, that I've definitely got my eye on, because I think they have taken that recipe and kind of gone their own way with it. But man, Civ 6 is like the one I would look up to and say, yeah, that of those types of games, that is kind of like the one I would say as being the godfather for. And I'd probably even go StarCraft 2 as well, as a game that has, over time, gotten better. Oh, you haven't got that one on your list as well?
It's on my list as well, yeah.
Sorry, it's almost like I looked at this list.
Right.
No. So, I mean, those two are games that I would say have both kind of just gotten better with time, as they've added bits to it. And my other one that's probably going to be very unique to me is Smite. This is more of a live service game, but ultimately it's a similar type of thing where the game was great on launch, and I really enjoyed it. And over time, it's only gotten better for the most part. They've done different things, and whilst I don't necessarily agree with everything they've done, I do like a lot of the things they've done. And overall, the game still keeps me entertained 7 years on from launch.
Yeah. I'm gonna obviously Civ 6 and StarCraft on my list. I'm gonna put Awesome Noughts in there, because for not indie, but for a smaller company, that was a game that I bought at launch, then went free to play. They added a shitload of content. It's no longer supported now, but that was a game that, I mean, say what you want about balance. Like, I'm not good enough at the game to talk about balance in it, but that game got better and better and better, and they added really good pieces of music. They added fun levels. They added really cool characters, and that was a game that was great at launch, and it's still great now. But I think probably for me, like, the best example I can give in terms of a game that came out amazing as is probably at its best is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. That's a fighting game that did the right thing, where it's like, you know what people don't like? People don't like paying for characters that were in the last game. So we're like, you know what? We're going to give you a roster of like 70 characters. Here's every character that's ever been in the game. You don't have to pay for them; they're just in the game. Oh, on top of that, there's like 900 hours of music. Oh, and there's like all these different online modes, and the game's like ridiculous. It's one of the most content-rich games I have ever played. In terms, you've got like over 100 stages. You got like I said, all the music. Like that for 50 quid. That game gives you, like, that music alone should be worth triple that. Like, it's crazy how many people worked on this game. And on that, they're like, hey, here's a fighter's pass. Every single character on this is new. You're getting not only a character, you're getting a stage and more music. And you could pick and choose, or you could buy them in a set. And that game, every time they patched it, it's like, oh, here's new patch notes. Here, we've made fighter adjustments. Not at one point is this game where I disagree with some of the fighter changes where they make this character a little bit weaker or this character a little bit stronger. But overall, they've been consistent. It's like, here's your character stage and music, here's a bunch of fighter changes, and this is like the most balanced Smash game with the most amount of content that literally costs 50 quid. And I can't overstate just how much content is in this game versus that price. And that to me was like, we're on like version 12.0 or something, and that is a game that's like just been like, I've not encountered any bugs, not encountered anything, and this is a game that just literally got better and better and better and better for me. Obviously, if you're not a Smash fan, you're not going to appreciate that, but this is probably the best example I can give of when a game came out wonderfully, had an incredible launch, and kept people coming back, because they had a consistent record of like, this is what you get in these updates. If you don't buy the DLC, you still get the fighter adjustments. Here's a big list of them. You know, and in terms of fighting games, they just did a better job than most other companies. But fighting games are quite good. A good example of games that usually come out in a pretty decent state and usually end up when they finished like in the best state they've ever been. That's not always the case, but Mortal Kombat 11 probably in the best state it's ever been in now with the characters they've added and things like that. They made some significant changes in that. So there are loads and loads of examples of games. Obviously, we said Civ 6 and StarCraft 2, and obviously the Total War games. I haven't played those, but I do know that having seen the stuff you've talked about, Greg, that those games have significantly improved. They've gotten better at their craft. They know how to make the game much smoother and stuff. And that to me has a huge impact on your as a player's enjoyment, but also coming back. You can see what the devs are trying to do. You can see that they actually care about the game they're trying to make. And for me, like, I can't, on a personal level, I'm like, here's Smash. This is like the best example, quite literally the ultimate example of a game done right and how you.
I have two philosophical tangents. I kind of want to fork off from things you've said.
Okay.
And one of them is Smash Bros. You're talking about games that came out really good at launch.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that Smash Bros. Has been iterated upon since the first game. And so when you say it's giving away all of this stuff, you're also saying that they did the right thing by giving it away because it's stuff we've already had before. The majority of the music and the majority of the characters we've already paid for many times previously. So it's kind of just doing the right thing to give them to us. And in a sense, you can say, well, this game has had some sticky updates. Ask the Brawl players.
Yeah,
it's
but
just kind of an interesting thing.
But
like,
we're not talking about
fighting games come out in a good state. Most fighting games are sequels, and most fighting games aren't adding a lot. They're just adding new characters. Most.
I will counter that point and say I've seen this argument about Smash and other fighting games, and I will say this: Smash Wii U, what everyone was like, oh, Smash Ultimate is Smash Wii U 0.5, is not true. The engine, the physics, everything is different. Yes, the characters look the same. Yes, they might play the same. But having played those games for like over 400 hours each, I can tell you that Smash Ultimate plays very different to Wii U, and there's absolutely zero chance that I would say those games are the same. They're not. They don't play the same. The combo game is very different. In terms of the content, yes, some of the music's the same. Yes, the characters are the same. But it's everything. There are so many changes in Ultimate that you might not realize. It's like it's someone from the outside. I'm not saying I know you play Smash, but say someone from the outside looks at these games and is like, well, what's different? There's the entire first video that they showed off. They're like, this is different. These animations are different. Like the it's so hard for someone who might not be into it as much as myself to realize how much actually changed from Wii U to Ultimate. And like it could be there is a lot of animations, a lot of the moves, the frame data, all this stuff. I don't want to go right into it, but to say that these games are, you know, iterative is fine, but to say that they are the same is a gross way, like, conception of these games when you actually break it down. And sure, like, I as someone who loved Melee and Brawl, and like, sure, Melee to Brawl, very, very different, much slower paced game with weird mechanics. But even then, I still love the games because every game you buy was content, like, rich. Like, when you buy a Smash game, you get a ton of everything. And to me, like, I hate when I buy a game where it's like, this is a great game, but there's nothing here to do, or there's not enough content. And obviously, I know Smash is just a game that I like, and other people don't have to like it. But I think it's really hard to knock it for saying, you know, oh, there's not much here to do. I'm like, no, there's a lot here to do. There is so much content in this game. Just Ultimate alone, there is so much content in this game.
I think what I'm saying is that there is a difference in expectations for, say, a brand new franchise or a game that's using a brand new engine. And in the case of Smash, you can say that, yes, they've rebuilt the engine, they've changed the physics. But from a design perspective, they're not having to reinvent how Kirby works. They're not having to rebalance everything. A lot of things do get rebalanced totally from scratch. But they have that design basis to work off. They have all the information, the feedback from several iterations, so they can say, this worked, this didn't. How about we try this? and it's undeniably a lot easier to walk from that base than say somebody who's making a brand new title. Terrible example, Cyberpunk, but it is a brand new title in a lot of ways. They're building the engine from scratch. It's somewhat different.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get on to Cyberpunk in a bit when we get
Yeah.
to stuff, but like, yeah, I agree. No, I know what you're saying. You're saying like, hey, they've got information to look at, and that is the same with like Civ 6. They had all of Civ 5 to look at. They're like, okay, what can we add here that's going to make this game new and fresh? StarCraft 2, Total Warhammer 2, Total Warhammer. They've got things to build on, right? But like, I think sometimes you have to like take individual products. Like if I was buying Total Warhammer 2 or the first one, like I have to start with, if I bought them on launch, let's say, I have to accept that they're different product. They're being released as different products. Therefore, I should take what I've been given in this product as, did it launch well? Is it being supported well? And I know they, from the bat in that instance, they said, hey, this is a trilogy. It's still separate products. You still have to buy them. And maybe you should look at it more as an expansion. But I feel like there's way more content in the second one to merit it just being an expansion. There's, these factions take time to make and stuff. So even though Smash Ultimate is a sequel to Wii U, I have to take it on product face value. If they were released like, oh, this is just Wii U with like extra stuff, then sure. But because this is the product, this is a brand new product that we're releasing, I have to look at it like that, I guess, and break it down as like, yeah, okay, cool.
There's one other philosophical tangent,
Yeah?
much shorter one, that I kind of just want to bring up, which is, what about when updates make games worse? That's a thing.
Yeah,
I have a few examples.
Yeah, and I think that is something that happens for sure. So I mean, like, feel free to fire off. I was going to suggest talking about games that launch badly, but if you want to go into this now,
well, we can come back around. I think.
Yeah. Keep that one.
But
Keep that one.
Let's fork off on this, because talking about games that have gotten so much better over launch, and one of the more interesting ones that's arguable is Star Wars Galaxies. There was an update that killed the game because they tried to make it into a more modern MMO. They basically tried to go, okay, World of Warcraft's popular, let's do that.
Yeah.
And then they lost everything that was interesting and unique about Galaxies, and it was lost forever because we'll never have another MMO like that. Not for a while. Well, that's kind of bullshit. We'll have them, but they'll be on private servers.
Yeah.
Another example, Endless Legend and Endless Space 2. Unfortunately, because I fucking love Endless Legend in particular, but Endless Legend, and I'm sure there are other examples of games that have done this, have released DLC with bugs in it, then not supported bug fixing, and then just left the bugs in. Especially in the case of Amplitude with these two games, when they've hired out a developer that's not really with the developer. They don't have an obligation to do things. They're contractors. They contract them to make this DLC, and then they say, cool, you're done. Don't worry about the bugs. And if you look at the review score for the latest Endless Space 2 expansion, it's been overwhelmingly negative. Not just because it was a bad expansion launch, but because it's kind of fucked the game up for players even that didn't buy it in some cases with bugs and things.
And it goes back to Warcraft 3 Reforged, really, doesn't it?
Oh, Jesus
With how
Christ.
that kind of...
Yeah.
They didn't just mess the game up, but they also messed it up for everyone who was enjoying the original games. And by, forcing everyone onto a server that they didn't have a choice but to accept. So, yeah. There's a...
No, I think... I don't want to linger too much on Blizzard stuff right now because of everything that's going on, but will say Warcraft 3 Reforged is an example of a game that was absolute shit on launch and didn't get better. And well, that's a great segue into games that on launch that didn't get better, and we can come back to Warcraft 3, but I'm like, yeah, it's shit. Don't play it. Let's start with you this time, Jack. What games have you that you played that were buggy on launch that you haven't gone back to, or even since they patched it, you just don't have the interest to?
The obvious one being Cyberpunk 2077. I think that was honestly one of my most anticipated games. And honestly, the foundation is definitely there. You can see they've done a lot of work, but when they released it, it was just not in a fit state to be launched at all. And there's so many issues that I encountered, bugs, cinematics not loading properly, things where like certain scenes you'd have guns that wouldn't despawn, so then they're like, it's just weird stuff going on, and it's really unfortunate.
Yeah,
But now they've come completely like pretty much cancelled the project. So
yeah,
we're never even going to see a revitalized version of it. It's like, yeah, this is a bad game and we're not going to do anything about it now. It's just like
yeah.
such an unfortunate, and I'm surprised with the company that did it being, who they are and what they did before with Witcher and Witcher 3, from like literally one of the best games made to whatever the fuck Cyberpunk 2077 was.
Yeah, I will say on that note of Cyberpunk, I will say they cancelled the multiplayer section. I know they had a roadmap of what they were going to update, and this is just for me on this particular game. This is a game I didn't play at launch. I specifically, or one of the reasons why I wanted a new computer back in the beginning of this year was to be able to play it, and I still haven't played it because I'm like, it's still buggy, and if they aren't going to fix it, I'm never going to play it. Like, it's simple as that, right? I genuinely wanted to play it because I was like, oh, I like Deus Ex. This has a very similar theme. They haven't fixed it. Why should I play it?
Yeah,
So
100%. There was one other on my list that I would say is probably worth mentioning, and that is Outriders, a
oh
game that I was hugely looking forward to. And again, there were issues, and the issues were more server related. But there were bugs, and again, just lots of challenges around that game, which was so unfortunate because I really enjoyed the game, but is they didn't release it in a good state. It needed probably another 6 months in the oven, I would say, to fully. Yeah, this game could have been one of their biggest titles,
yeah,
and because the launch was so bad, I'm not going to be the only player that says, "Do you know what? This was a shit show. I'm not gonna bother." I mean, yourself and Dave, we were all gonna do a co-op game together, and you guys never bought it in the end because of all the issues surrounding it.
yeah.
So your patience kind of paid off in that regard.
That will be another. I mean, just quick to interject here. Like, that is something that's really important to me. If a game launches at 50 quid and it's buggy at launch, that puts me off immediately because I'm not in a position where I can just drop 50 quid on a game that's just shit, like, or shit at launch. Like, I can't afford to do that. That's why a lot of the times I will wait a week or I will give it a few days when the game's come out and then buy it because I don't. My choices are limited. If I have to buy like a slightly cheaper game that's going to be really good, or this thing to play multiplayer with you, I don't want to drop the money if the game's going to crash. And I watched you stream it, and I saw it crash, and like or whatever. Some things happen with it. I know you had server issues with it, so it's kind of like, I have to. I have to make those choices, and that was one of the ones where it's like I actually enjoyed the demo. I thought the demo was so cool, but the game came out and it wasn't in a good state.
Yeah, the problem with that, the game was really good. I actually had a really fun time playing it, but you just get kicked out the server for no reason, and then the server be offline for literally a day. You couldn't sign back in. You'd be waiting on the login screen for like half an hour, and you're like, you know, I can't be bothered. And then you come back and it's like, I really want to play the game. It's like I was really enjoying it, and then come back 4 hours later, same login error, and it's like, do you know what? This is killing me.
Yeah.
I did manage to get through the game, but there were just lag issues. There were issues with the cinematics, just like the animations were just weird in some cases. Um, and I think if they do an Outriders 2, I think it will be really good. I think they'll
Yeah.
learn from the experience and the issues. But until then, this game really genuinely could have been the next big Destiny 2 type of game, looter shooter.
Yeah.
And it failed because of its issues and because it was released before it was ready.
Yeah.
And that has basically destroyed an IP that actually was really good.
Yeah.
Whether they'll ever
Right.
recover from that and whether they'll ever continue to invest in it, we don't know. But
Yeah. That's the thing is we got. I mean, it sold well. It did so well.
It did,
So we shall see.
but a lot of people were pissed off and didn't buy the game or didn't continue playing the game and got
Yeah.
refunds.
Yeah. Greg, like, what about you? What games have that were bad on launch that you haven't revisited, or games that you just you don't want to revisit?
I think I'm a little more forgiving, perhaps, in that generally, if a game is bad at launch, either like I won't play it, but I will assess it on its own merits if it gets better later, unless there's really, really good reasons why these people have fucked me over in the past. For example, I felt very burned on Marvel vs. Capcom 3, though that's less about the quality of the game and more about their pricing and their dishonesty with regards to releasing an Ultimate version a year later, despite saying that they were going to support it with DLC characters. But
Great game. Go and buy it.
I think an example that's probably the best example I can give of this, a game that legitimately pissed me off to the point where it's not that I won't give it another chance, but it's kind of soured and missed the window for me, is Monster Hunter World. They released it on consoles, and they said it's going to be a little while before the PC launch. I was like, okay, I'll wait. Finally, nearly a year later, we got a PC release date, and finally got a launch. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm ready for this. I've waited a year. I know that companies aren't always great with PC ports. This is kind of archaic to release an entire year later on PC unless you're Rockstar Games, which make that seem like an incredible turnaround time. They're like 4 years or whatever the hell it was for GTA 5. Anyway, so they finally released Monster Hunter World on PC, and the optimization was so bad that my PC basically couldn't run it. And I'd waited all that time. And I could have had it on console. Obviously, the players on console had then been playing for an entire year with all the gear. This is, Monster Hunter, it is a single player. It's a game you can play single player, but if you're interested in the community and the multiplayer, it can be a lot more difficult to catch up. You want to be there with the community, unlocking new things and getting new armor. And I waited to be there with the PC community. And because of this, there was no way I was going to be able to play it until years later when I was able to upgrade my PC. And it kind of soured it for me. I really love the Monster Hunter games, but I've not managed to get back into it.
Yeah.
You've reminded me of a game, Horizon Zero Dawn. Talking of like ports and how royally they fucked that game up. It's literally one of the best story-driven games, and they fluffed it for PC. Just so gutting. I mean, I did power through because the story was so good, but it was the only merit I could give the game is the fact that the story was awesome. Everything else, man, that game just there are so many crashes and errors and lag issues that I was at the point where I'm just going to give up, even though I dumped like 40 hours into the game. I'm like, it's like, yeah, that was a disappointing port if ever I saw one.
It is interesting because now you're starting to see a lot more PS4 games come to PC. Because I'm pretty sure Detroit Become Human was a PS4 exclusive, and I'm pretty sure the port of that was pretty good. So,
Game of the year last year, absolutely.
Yeah.
That is
Weird, isn't it?
Amazing. But it's just
So-
optimization. It clearly wasn't optimized for PC. That's the problem. They released it far too early before it had the proper testing, I think. And it was kind of like a case of, they patched it eventually, but by that time, they'd already, you have a game like that, everyone's going to play it on launch, right?
Yeah.
And if it's not good on launch, it's just 50% of those people might just be like, you know what, I can't be bothered with this. I'll just watch someone play it on YouTube or something and just get a refund. And then that's, 50% of your player base gone on day one.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's the problem, innit? The game companies want people to buy this product day one because that's when they make the most money, probably, and then obviously sales and things. But if you fluff it, refund, especially if it doesn't run on PC. Console, it's usually a little bit different. Like console, you kind of expect it to run it. Everyone's gonna have the same experience, or they should. But yeah, on PC, obviously, I have a few games I just want to list off. First few of them I haven't played, but I think they're worth, in my opinion, I think they're worth mentioning because of the launches of these games. Obviously, Cyberpunk we talked about. Anthem was nothing like the game that BioWare promised. And again, I liked the original trailer when I saw it. I was like, oh, this is cool, flying through this big world. Game came out, it was like nothing like it. It was like half baked. It was just awful. Like, and then you hear stories later on that they basically mismanaged the whole project, kind of like Cyberpunk. Fallout 76, fucking one of the most buggy things I've ever seen on launch. Then he comes out and says, "Oh, it's not about the launch; it's about the way you go from there." I'm like, "No, no, 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 no! You can't expect people to stick around if your game does not work and is crashing their computer." A game that I think Greg might disagree with me on this, but I had to bring it up because Sea of Thieves, when it launched, there was nothing to do in that game. There literally was nothing to do. Now, on the other hand, if you play the game now, there is a lot more stuff you can do in it. But I remember what all the reviewers said the same thing at the time. Like, it looks pretty and it plays well, but there's nothing to do. And I'm like, why would you release a game in a state with literally very minimal content? And that was, it's not a bad game. It ran well.
Play it, so I can't comment on that.
I just remember the reviews. Like, I remember I looked at it because I was like, oh my god, Rare are actually making it like what looks like a cool game, this big piratey game. And then every single review was the same. They were like, yeah, it's beautiful and you can sail the seas, but there's not much else. And obviously now, since then, all the content's been free. It's been massively successful on Game Pass. But, you know, I just, it's just an interesting thing where it's like, here's a game that actually runs really well, but there wasn't anything to do there. And then we get to 3 games that I did play, and I want to bring up right now. Commandos 2 HD Remaster is probably one of the worst remasters I've ever played. I bought it, played it for 15 minutes, and refunded it. I'd rather just play the original, which still works, and I already have it. That was a remaster done really badly. It was buggy. The UI was worse. There was just audio glitches all over the place. Now, I love the Commando series. I want to see these games. I want more people to play them. They're hard, tactical games. But it just wasn't acceptable. I still haven't gone back and redone it now. I know they've patched it. I've seen the patch notes for this game, but no, I don't want to play it again. One game that we did play that I think I will go and revisit. I don't know when, but I do want to revisit, and that is Torchlight 3, which was disappointing because Torchlight 2 is a fantastic game. Right, Torchlight 2 is one of the best action RPGs I've ever played, up there with like Grim Dawn, up there with like Path of Exile. Torchlight 2 is amazing. Like, literally, like one of the coolest art styles, like really, really fun gameplay. Torchlight 3 has great classes and cool abilities, but the game was just not very good multiplayer. The quests were breaking, and like, normally I wouldn't give a game another go. I actually had enough enjoyment with it, with the class that I was playing, with the guy with the train. There's like a train guy who basically summons like a cart that has cannons on it. I was having enough fun to get through it. But
fucking trainomancer.
Yeah. But the entire time I played with Dave and Jack, it was one problem after another. And those guys, they were like, and I'm like, I don't blame them. Why would you come back to this game? Like, this is a really poor showing, and it was because that game halfway through development was what was meant to be an MMO, became a single player or standard kind of story. So clearly that wasn't good. And then the last game, which I think is probably the biggest one for me, was Borderlands 3. I did originally play it on my old computer, and then I played it on this one. And that game, I love the Borderlands series. I think Borderlands 2 is a fantastic game, and 3 has amazing mechanics, but that game ran like shit. And I still haven't forgiven them to this day because there is no excuse for Borderlands 3 or for me to have as many bugs as I did when it came to not even starting the game. It would crash when I hit the start button. None of the cutscenes worked basically for me. Like actual, not the in-game ones, but the actual like video cutscenes. Constant audio bugs, like all the time. Constant visual glitches all the time. And my old computer, not amazing, but it had more than enough specs to run it, and it just ran like shit. I had to run it at like 30 frames, basically. New computer runs better, but it still isn't very well optimized. And I haven't bothered since, the other expansions and stuff. I haven't played it really since because I love that game, but I don't want to give that company money. If you can't make it run like on these less ended hardware, I mean, this isn't a bad computer. This is pretty decent. But it still runs like shit. I want to be able to run it at a nice, steady 60 frames. Not like Gearbox doesn't have the money to make that happen. And that for me is one of the most disappointing times when a game launched and was, I got it to work. Me and Jack did play through it, but I couldn't. At the time, I couldn't recommend it to anyone. Even now, I'm not sure I can recommend it to people because if you've got the wrong hardware in your computer, that game's going to run like trash, and you're better off getting it on console at this point if you just want a steady experience rather than one that's all over the place. And that sucks to say, but that's the truth of the matter.
The worst thing when a game runs worse on an objectively more powerful machine when you have a more powerful PC. It's just...
But that's because everybody's PC is usually different. There's such a mixture of hardware, and they obviously interact differently. But still, like you've got to look at what most people are probably playing on, and you've got to be able to make the thing run well on those system specs. Most people aren't like Jack, who has a ridiculous computer, and that will run pretty much anything, and should run most things well. People like you and me that have, I would say, let's say mid-range. Most people are probably going to have mid-range to low-range. So
I think mine's well, okay, sure, mid-range.
We go, mid-range is,
Sure.
there's high range, and then there's like ultimate, like up like a ridiculous range, which is what Jack has. So, But those games I've just listed off there are probably ones that the last three anyway are games that really, I don't know why I want to go back and check out Torchlight 3. Maybe I want to re-experience that. Borderlands was, I stuck through it, and Commandos I'll probably never go back to because it was so bad. And there are better games that are the same style. But I think all three of us have brought up really good examples of games. This is my problem with launches. Most of these games we've mentioned were high-budget companies. These weren't small indie like things that we, were like, okay, fair enough. If a company, I can't even remember what the company's called, the ones that make Ori and the Blind Forest, can make a nice 2D platform, technically it's 3D assets in that game as well, that runs and sounds as good as that on a much smaller budget, then it makes me disgusted at like how mismanaged things are with bigger companies these days.
Well, there's a running theme, I think, and there's a reason that I haven't played so many of these games that don't get better, which is that generally you gotta support the indies. Because have you ever played an indie game with as egregious bugs as you get in these AAA games? Ever? Really?
Probably. I can't
never get
now,
that.
But probably.
You never get that.
I guess they put a lot more time and effort into it. It's kind of like their opening
labor of love
IP, isn't it? More often than not with an indie company.
You raise an interesting point because at the same time, the counter to that would be, and I'm just playing devil's advocate, is that there is a shitload of indie shovelware and asset flips. And I'm not saying that you or me or Jack or most people are going to buy those, but they do exist, and that would be the kind of equivalent. Because I have seen games, I have played a couple of indie games on the Wii and the Wii U, where I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Not amazing. And that might be my own fault. Maybe I should have done more research into it. But I do think there are indie games out there that are just a bit crap. And maybe they're not buggy, but I imagine there are ones out there that are. And I've seen a couple, but I wouldn't buy them myself. But they're usually like 99p or they're mobile ports, But I get your point.
I mean, that's always going to be a thing. You're always going to get crap games.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't matter if they're buggy or not, they're just shit.
Yeah. I mean, if you want a really good example of a game that launched, I don't think it ever will need a patch, something like Hades. I've never had a bug or anything issues with that game. I'm not saying
very
it doesn't.
well optimized game. Doom Eternal was probably another one where it was very well optimized on launch.
That's AAA though. I meant just indie games.
Oh, sorry for talking indies, yeah.
But yeah. No, you're right. Doom Eternal was good on launch, but like you're right. Most indie games I've played that were actually good, I can't think that had like any significant. Might have had some that have crashed. I've definitely played indie games that have crashed, but in terms of like game-breaking bugs, nothing comes to mind. So yeah, unlikely that. And I know they're smaller projects, but they are people that really want to put out a good project. They haven't got some overlord over them,
You can pre-order my indie game today, releasing 2030. You can't.
You can't yet, but yeah. So I guess like I know you guys probably have other things you want to talk about. So the last thing I wanted to bring up was live service. Thoughts on live service games. Now, specifically, live service is a type of monetization. Sorry, I always get that word wrong. Where a game, generally free to play, but not always, will release, and the idea is that they keep the player engaged and have them coming back all the time to replay their game. by having a lot of FOMO, so fear of missing out on a lot of stuff, and by having like daily login things, all this sort of stuff, in the idea that that person will end up buying a lot of microtransactions. That's basically what a game as service is meant for. It's meant to get players to buy a lot of microtransactions. Now, you don't have to. I would say the most obvious example I play would be Rocket League. Rocket League is a game that is, at its core, is really fun. It's just car football. But that game has some of the worst, or some of the most expensive microtransactions I've ever seen, and some of the worst FOMO I've ever seen.
Yeah,
And it's kind of disgusting. And I hate it. I know you, obviously, Jack, you play Smite and you play Final Fantasy 14, Greg. Now, I know Final Fantasy 14 is free. Is it the expansions it costs now? I can't remember.
Yeah, there's 3 expansions currently out. I wouldn't necessarily call it a live service game in the same sense. It technically is, but by the definitions you just gave, it's definitely.
It's more. Is it subscription? Is it subscription based?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I all MMOs to me, which have PvP, basically live service, because they're constantly updating. The microtransaction bit is mostly from free to play stuff, but you're starting to see some of that come over. And it doesn't necessarily mean that Final Fantasy has to have all those things.
Yeah.
But yeah, what
There's
I want to do,
a lot of mount and costume and dance and various cosmetic stuff being now sold in addition to the subscription, which has gotten a lot bigger and is not something I'm a big fan of.
Yeah. So I want to get your thoughts on, and again, like Jack, you play Smite, but you've probably played other games. I wanted to get both your guys' thoughts on live service stuff now, because obviously live service games, the idea is that they go on for a very long period of time, like anything like League of Legends, Dota, Fortnite. You know, these massive games are still going, they're still updating. Obviously, you guys have your own ones you play, but just like your thoughts on that kind of model, you know, and is that something that's, you know, keeps you engaged, or is it something you wish it was just like a, you know, maybe a one and done purchase or whatever? I'll start with you, Jack, this one.
So I think my best example is Smite, and I think it is done really well. So when I first got Smite free to play, it still is a free to play game, and there was a god pack. You spent 20 quid, and you get all the gods that were available then and there, and every future god. 7 years on, I'm still getting all the gods that are being released that they bring out. I don't have to pay for anything else. There are all the add-ons are generally cosmetic and voice packs. You earn in-game gems, which you can use again for cosmetics. And if you want to speed up the process, you can, you know, buy them with real-world money. Granted, a lot of the skins these days, whilst amazingly cool and have like crossovers with like other shows and other things, well, the franchise is hell of expensive on some of them, especially when you start going into like the premium, oh, what'd you call it when you go to a, sorry, I'm trying to think of the word. So when you got like a tracker and then you do it the whole
Premium pass, battle
premium
pass,
pass, battle pass, battle pass. That's
yeah.
the one I'm thinking of. So don't know why it took me so long to think of that. But yeah, so like the premium battle pass is so expensive. It's like thousands of gems, which generally is like 40 quid.
Ooh.
It's expensive. It's expensive. And then when you consider some of the skins at the end, if you missed out, are like 10,000 gems, which is, you're looking at 80 quid to 100 quid basically. It's mental. So yeah, it's not cheap, but ultimately I think the actual game content, I mean, this is all cosmetic, so it doesn't make you any better or anything or worse at the game. It's just purely cosmetic. So I can get on board of it for that, but I think some of the pricing is a bit egregious, to be fair. And I think, you know, it's it's
We love that word here.
yeah, we do, absolutely. But yeah, I think the actual model's fine, it works, but I think companies can take it too far and kind of just milk it too much. Whereas, yeah, some of these skins, if they were like 5-10 quid, I'd probably go for them because they're actually really cool skins. But because they charge so much, it's just like, Christ, it just puts me off massively. But it's not a pay to win game, so I can't grumble from that front. They've kept true to their word over, you know, 7-8 years of gaming, so I can respect them for that.
Yeah, Greg.
Uh,
I mean, oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say the only other one I was gonna bring up was probably Elder Scrolls Online. So this is a different type of. It still falls under live service, but it's subscription based. So you're still paying for the game over a long period of time. But again, it is, you're paying a 20 quid subscription every month type of thing, rather than it's free and then you just buy loot boxes. Essentially, you can still buy cosmetics and things, but nothing that actually empowers your character outside of things that kind of like getting a vampire trait essentially, or a werewolf trait, which can affect your character, which you can do in the real in the sort of in the game world, or you can pay for it to fast track. But it is mostly fast track options rather than instant level up, that type of thing, which WoW does do. But yeah, ESO kind of one of those games that has been really interesting to see its development. It started off as an okay game, to be fair. People kind of liked it, but they weren't like, oh wow, this is like the next best thing. This is the next WoW. But over the years, the game has become one of the best MMORPGs. And I don't play MMORPGs at all, really. I used to, back when I was younger, but the one game I do keep coming back to that's an MMO is ESO. Every now and then I will put 10, 20 quid down for a month or two subscription and just play it for a couple of weeks or a month, and it's actually really fun. It is genuinely a great MMORPG, but again, there's nothing there that's pay to win.
Yeah,
I think I'd love to seg off that because there's something I really love about ESO's monetization model, which is like I would love it if more games did this, where they give you an option to just pay a subscription for all the content coming out, all of the expansions and things, and you get all the DLC just by paying that subscription. Or you can say, I don't want to pay a fucking subscription. I want to just pay a one-off and own it. And you can do that with everything. You can pay for inventory upgrades, and you can pay for like all the little premium things. Most of them, I think possibly with the exception of the crafting bag, which is an annoying exception, which normally pushes me towards the subscription. Most of the things you can just buy one off, and I love that.
That's a good point. I didn't think of that.
What were you going to say, Levi?
it's more to pass it over to you. So, like, what are your experiences with live service? Obviously, brought up before Final Fantasy 14, but there might be other things you've played as well.
Yeah, I think it's probably more interesting to talk about a couple of others here. Talking more about these kind of freemium style games. There's one game other than ESO, which is a bit in between and a really interesting model that I respect a lot. I would play the game more if I could find people to play it with. I've never managed to find people who want to play it with me. We could play. I've got a few characters, man. If you want to dip back in. Although obviously right now I'm big into FF14, which is experiencing it's been a great game for many years. Now it's really hitting the peak. For many reasons, people want to jump ship from WoW to FF14. What's going on right now with Blizzard certainly isn't helping them, saying that they're basically not working on the game right now until all this shit's resolved. Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about what I think is the best free-to-play game in terms of what it gives you and just the quality of the game. That's Warframe. Warframe, bloody incredible what it gives you for free. I don't necessarily love the direction it's gone in, and it suffers flaws as a result of its monetization model, like the fact there's new fucking guns every week up on the shop and you'll never be able to have them all, and there's a big power creep happening with that. That's the balance of the weapons in the game, whoever's sorting that, at least back when I was playing, it seemed very arbitrary and just odd. But incredible game, and I've never really had to pay for the game. On a couple of occasions, I've bought platinum when I get like a big discount, and then I just coasted off that a long time because just like what Eve does, you can sell in-game stuff to players who can pay you with that platinum currency, which you can then buy inventory upgrades and other shit with. That's great. That's awesome. Gives cheapskates like me way to make money, and it's not even that hard. It's not like I have to grind for hours. It's just like, oh, I've got all this extra prime parts shit that I don't actually need. I'm just going to sell it to other players. Easy. There's a whole Warframe site for just selling things. Something else I do want to talk about in live service games, because I think it could have been the best. I think it could have topped Warframe for me, is Genshin Impact. It's a fantastic game. If it were just a single player game, just a Breath of the Wild like game, it's like Breath of the Wild, but you collect characters and they've got their own little side quests, and there are parts of the game where you're like, oh, you're doing this side quest. This is where I would normally get this character after I've finished it. But you don't. You then have to open a fucking loot box. And that's where the game kind of falls flat. Other than some content stuff that I just like, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of. I don't think a lot of Western players enjoy having the fucking fairy character who screeches incessantly in your ear. That's it. I could do without that. But the game is fantastic, and they keep giving away shit for free. It's just a shame that they want you on a fucking treadmill in order to play, or they want you on these really outrageous prices. You look at YouTubers going, "Oh, I spent $1,000 on pulls." And there's one more game I want to briefly mention because it's probably the most egregious of the lot, and I just played it as it came out the other day. It's Pokemon Unite, because of all these games, you'll hear about a lot of them going, some of these prices are really fucking outrageous, but ultimately it's a cosmetic. You don't need it. Pokemon Unite literally just has pay-to-win items that help you in the game. That's pretty bad, alongside the prices really outrageous.
I wasn't going to bring that up, but I'm glad you did, because you reminded me of Apex Legends and Valorant. Valorant, I think it's free to play. I don't actually know. If you know what Valorant is, it's basically the guys that made League of Legends, but it's like a first-person shooter. One of the skins is like $400. I'm not even shitting you. I'm like, why do you need to charge that amount of money? Pokemon Unite, what the skins are that? Like the premium skins are 20 quid. And as much as I don't want to keep bringing up Blizzard, I need to talk about StarCraft 2 and Heroes of the Storm, because those are two games that I have played that are live servicey. Less StarCraft 2, more Heroes of the Storm. Something that I fucking hate about Blizzard products, and even more so now, is the price of things. Heroes of the Storm has one of the best ways of gaining stuff in it. You get loot boxes, you get what you can buy. So you can either get the loot box that will give you random items. You can specifically buy the items you want with the in-game currency and or whatever the other thing is. And there's other shit as well through events. So like it gives you options. I don't like loot boxes, I think they're awful, but you get options, right? A skin in that game, a premium skin, is like 10 to 15 quid. I refuse to pay more than about £5 for a skin. And there are worse examples. Apex had a battle pass that was like 120 quid or some shit. Like it's these games are doing. I can't remember. Basically, the way it worked out was I think you bought the battle pass, and then to get everything at the end cost money. You have to open these things, and like this is
what bothers me is when you compare the price of like when it feels like you've lost a great deal from a game going to this model by saying, I would love it if this game released and I could just buy it for a normal game price. But Heroes of the Storm, 8 quid characters. I would love to actually support that game and the developers that made it, because I loved the game for gameplay. But if I wanted to just buy all the characters, it would cost me several hundred quid, and I'm not doing that.
Yeah, and that's the problem.
Get a dime out of me.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Like, I've spent money in that game, and that was fine because it was like dirt cheap bundles where it was like, here's a bunch of old characters that came out 4 years ago for like 10 quid. I'm like, great, I'm getting like 10 characters for 10 quid. That's more value than like any other character, like stuff like that I'm okay with. But I when it comes to live server, even StarCraft 2, a game that I genuinely love, they're like, hey, we had these kind of like these battle passy things that were like, you level up and you get a bunch of free skins. But we're going to sell each one to you for like 40 quid. I'm like, so you want me to buy for 40 quid an entire new skin set? I'm like, that's not value for money.
A whole entire game for that.
Like, I get it. Like, the art teams in a lot of these games, their job when the game is complete is to go and make new stuff. And I don't have a problem with that. But 40 quid for an entire skin set. Now, yeah, it goes on sale for 20 quid. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of more reasonable. But the things that I don't mind spending money on are like, here's a new voice announcer that's going to announce, that to me is like actual genuine content. Most of the extra voice announcers are funny. Yeah, they're like £9. But again, they go on sale fairly regularly. I'm like, that's cool. But the way that live service games do their monetization, the core game, and especially with a MOBA, the thing with a MOBA is generally you have rotations of characters. So you have like maybe 10 characters on rotation out of a roster of 80, let's say. And then you pick and choose the ones you want. But when you make it super grindy, and then you're like, hey, here's the button to skip all this shit, give us like 50 quid, like, I'm not okay with that, and I've never been okay with that. Like, a game that we didn't even bring up that did this and had this in the game was Shadow of War. When that released, that had a thing in the shop where you could go there, and they fucked up the XP system, so you specifically would go to the shop with the little dude, there he was. Have
you played Shadow of War?
Yeah,
because I have, and that's bullshit.
No, that is true, and it was on launch.
The XP
it was on launch.
Was grindy. You did not need to grind.
Yes, it was. There were boosters
you didn't
in that
play
game.
The game. I literally did my research on this before buying it.
I played the game.
Is this real? And I looked at players' opinions, and they were like, "Nah, the options are in there to skip." I'm not saying it's good to put that option in, but they didn't go so far as to artificially inflate the XP.
You cannot.
I never bought anything in that game, and I know that they obviously patched some things out, but
so
they didn't change the XP curve.
You cannot prove that they didn't or did not change that. Like, we know that any time a game that's full price, like Assassin's Creed,
Conspiracy
not Valhalla.
Theories.
No, Assassin's Creed. Was it Odyssey? One of the Assassin's Creed games released, and everyone was like, "My God, it takes forever to upgrade." And then 2 weeks later, they were like, "Hey, you can buy this XP booster. They're like a one-time thing.
Assassin's Creed did it.
Yeah, so did Shadow of War.
I always defend Shadow of War because that's just hearsay. It's not.
That
true.
is true.
The XP curve is
literally true, man.
And I've played through the whole game, so I can say from personal experience.
Anytime a single-player game, I know there is a multiplayer aspect to thinking. Anytime a single-player game comes out and they add a booster thing in, you can pretty much be assured they've fucked with the XP boost because they want you to buy it. It might only be 10 quid, but it's an extra £10, right? When is a game like 60 quid anymore? That's why these live service mechanics are in everything. Maybe not in the same way that I've brought up so far, but that is a big no-no. And you cannot trust the developers. You cannot trust Warner Brothers Games, a company known for shoving microtransactions in everything, that they didn't fuck with it. And I know they only published it, but it's the publishers that fuck with these games. And
all I will say is this: I will say, from my perspective, what it seemed to be is that people who loved this game, and clearly Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor were people that were made by incredibly creative people that came out with incredibly innovative systems. You can't say that the Nemesis system or some.
I'm not about the gameplay.
I know. Let me finish. You can't say that was made by someone who was just trying to put out some bullshit product. These were games made by people who truly wanted to make a great single-player RPG. And playing through Shadow of War, it seems to me to be the case that they made the game as they wanted to make it, and then the publisher came in and said, "Okay, can we put some microtransactions and some stuff in the game?" And in the case of the level boost, I'm sure somebody tried to come and say, "Why don't we turn the knob a little bit and adjust the XP?" And it seems to be, from my case, that they probably discussed it because obviously they would have wanted to. Like you say, I don't trust WB, of course they want to do that, of course. But it seems to me that somebody within the team was able to say, "No, I don't want that, and that's a step too far for me, and I'm not going to let it happen," because the XP grind seems perfectly matched to the levels of the enemies you fight in the game just from finishing the story quest. There's no.
And I would agree with you if it wasn't for the fact that I can give you an even more recent example being Mortal Kombat 11. In Mortal Kombat 11, you have the crypt, and inside the crypt,
I'm not talking about Mortal Kombat 11.
I know, but this is why I don't trust WB, because in Mortal Kombat 11 there were these you go into the crypt and you unlock different currencies. It's like 5 different currencies or some shit for a single player part of the game to unlock skins and all this other stuff. and they do. So they were doing that. So they were like, oh, you can just buy it, and yeah, they toned it down. They did adjust it, and they came out and apologized for it. But that you can guarantee that was double WB, and on top of that, you can also buy easy fatality tokens. Yeah, I'm not joking. This is right, and there was something else as well. This game, like Mortal Kombat 11, is a good game. Like I wasn't gonna say it's amazing because I prefer other Mortal Kombat games, but I really like Mortal Kombat 11 because of the characters and it's a fighting game, right? But when you look at this stuff, I'm like, I do not trust anything with WB on it because they're like EA, like these other corporations. They will sneak them in wherever. Dead Space 3, another great example. And yeah, I do not trust that they don't fuck with the XP curve because they want you to buy these things. They're like, hey, you can make some money off some people like this.
I'm not saying they didn't want to. I'm saying somebody there stood up for the game.
They're
great.
Unfortunately, Greg, I don't believe you.
These big developers, they're not as simple as just being run by the people above them. If it gets that bad, people are just going to quit, and we're seeing in a lot of cases that people do quit when they get enough money to sort of be independent. And for a great look into this, watch Mythic Quest because it goes really well, and it's a show about game development for people who don't know game development in the games industry, and it goes really well into this whole struggle between the people who love the games and the people who want to make money out of them, and the interplay. And honestly, the publishers, they're still people. The people who want to make money, they're still doing their jobs.
Yeah, but this is the thing: is you've got to remember the publisher is usually the one that foots the bill, or like puts a big chunk of money in the advertising of it, and that's where the deadlines come from a lot of the time. That's why you have people that will independently publish or whatever. But when you think about it, they're the ones that like, hey, we want to make money out of this product. What ways can we do it? They're not going to turn a blind eye to microtransactions, battle passes, season passes, all this other stuff. And this is a whole another topic for another day anyway. But the reason I bring up these examples
is Mythic Quest, man.
is because we're in a time now where we've seen a lot of things happen. We've seen a lot of live service mechanics into full price games. We've seen microtransactions come into things, and from my experience, you cannot trust. Yeah, the people on that team might absolutely love the product they make, but they're not the people that make the game are not the heads of the studios.
They don't have no power. They have perhaps less power, but they don't have
little power. And this is the thing. It's like, I want to believe what you're saying about Shadow War, but I don't. I've seen the evidence back when it first released. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's someone out there that can prove this to me, like, this is what we intended. But I'm probably never going to know that. And I no way I'm going to give WB the benefit of the doubt. It's just not going to happen.
I hate to bring it back around to Blizzard, but do you think Chris Metzen, when he was working there, do you think if he steps in and goes, I'm going to take a stand on this, I'm not going to let this happen. Do you think, and if he goes, listen, if this keeps going on, I'm going to quit. Do you think that makes no difference? Do you think the publishers aren't going to think, what's a fucking $1,000 or a couple $10,000 here or there going to matter? We want to keep certain people. And obviously, if they keep ignoring that too much, then all their good developers leave and you end up with a husk of a company, which of course has never happened to any company.
Which is the problem with, and again, like, I know we're talking about Blizzard, but like, is the case. Can happily say that I don't think Blizzard has released a good game in years. Maybe Overwatch was the last good one they released, and even that I didn't like. It was not a game made for me, but I don't think they give a fuck anymore, and we're seeing that now. I don't think anybody, like, it's the heads, it's always the people at the top. And again, we are getting a little bit off topic here, but like, this is a whole discussion about this stuff. But I do think that, some people just don't have as much power as you think. I would like to believe they do. I really would, but like, it's usually the head of that studio.
I've got a more nuanced approach or a more nuanced viewpoint than that. I think it's not quite as black or white, all or nothing.
No, and I don't think it is, but you've got to think, at the end of the day, it stops with the heads of the studio, whether that's like the CEO of that particular company or like the creative director at the top. They're the ones that are going to make those decisions. They might have the lowers come and talk to them, and I'm not saying they're not going to listen, but it's going to be between those people and the publisher, isn't it? Realistically.
Let's bring it back on topic and say there's a perfect example of this in FF14, because you can see the interplay of the CEO of the company and the director of the game in their live streams and in the live events where they talk to each other, and you can clearly see, like, people running the companies don't want to just like shut out creative people. They need the creative people. Those are the people coming up with the great ideas. They're not going to just always say no, do it my way. It's like, no, I hired you to come up with ideas.
Yeah, but you also, I mean, Japanese companies work quite differently over here, and again, a conversation for another day. But I agree.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're wrong.
Probably in the opposite direction. They're probably more conservative in this respect. So Western
Yeah.
companies are probably a bit more free, if anything.
Yeah, but all of this said, right? Like, I think live service is an interesting aspect to games. I can say from my own personal experience, I tend to shy away from a game that's considered live experience service, because usually that means that it's going to be supported in a way that with a lot of expensive stuff. It's going to use a lot of fear of missing out. Again, I play Rocket League. It's probably one of the biggest exceptions where I do play it, but I absolutely hate the way that game is monetized and what they do to try and keep people going. And I think it's disgusting to play on people's like FIFA. We already talked about FIFA and like EA stuff, like awful for it. But like, you guys have probably, I mean, Jack, you've played Smite, and Greg, you've played Final Fantasy 14, sorry, not 11. And you guys have had much better experiences with live service games than I have personally. And for me, it's something I can't say I'm a fan of personally.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. It depends on the on whoever's developing the game. High res do tend to have a better subscription model to others in that kind of MOBA space. But that's, you're gonna have to take it on a game by game basis. Some companies do just milk it. Other companies seem to have a much better approach. And I do think, having a God pack or having something where, if you were to put the tag, let's say, on Heroes of the Storm, £10 a hero or God or whatever you want to call them. If you were to do that in Smite, you could easily spend close to £1,000. There's 100 gods.
That's one of the things I wanted to say.
10 quid a god is £1,000, and I got it all for 20 quid. So, yeah, I dare I say there's just ways of doing things. And suffice to say, Heroes of the Storm no longer runs or exists as a live service model anymore because they've stopped developing the game. Whereas Smite is still going 7 years on, and it was a game years before Heroes of the Storm. So, in my experience, there's a good way of doing it, and then there's Heroes of the Storm way of doing it.
I'll actually count that and say they actually are still updating Heroes of the Storm. Whether new characters come out, probably not, but they've recently had a balance patch.
Fair enough.
So it's probably a skeleton team that's still on it, but
Yeah.
in terms of being like active,
there's no esports anymore, as far as I can see. Whereas Smite has an active esports.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm not going to go into the Heroes of the Storm thing, but there is a very good reason as to why it doesn't. But that's a story for another day.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. That is. It's true. When you've got a game like Smite,
if you alienate your customers, they're not going to support you. It's as simple as that, really.
Yeah, it's just a case of like, do I want to buy a 40 quid game that's going to keep me occupied for potentially a whole year in games like Skyrim, games like Grim Dawn, or do I want to start playing a game for free and then in a year it will have cost me 200 quid to keep playing? It seems like a good deal up front, but generally it's just a worse deal for the consumer.
Mm-hmm. I will say Smite. I have over the years spent money on Smite. To be fair,
well, that's because you had a good experience playing the core game, and because it was free, and you bought the gods, and then decided, you know what, I've got like hundreds of hours out of this. I don't mind supporting these developers. That to me is how you do it.
I was going to say that I have literally spent thousands of hours playing that game over the course of 7 or 8 years. I don't play it half as much as I used to, but it's one of those things that if done right, I think any model works. It's just it has to be done right and in a way that's not obnoxious, that just pisses off your customer base, because once you've lost your customer, it's gone. And it's the same thing with patching. If you're gonna do a day one launch and it's shoddy at best, then ultimately your customers are going to be like, do you know what, fuck this, I'm not paying 50 quid for a game that's half done or half baked. You're just not going to, and you'll find something else. There's so many games coming out, so many developers that actually, people don't have to be as loyal as they once were to some of these companies who just, I mean, take EA as a prime example. How many times have they burnt their Battlefield customers? And how big is that customer base now compared to what it was 5 years ago? Yeah, they've moved on to other things because, burn me once, oh, shame on me. Burn me twice, shame on you. Do you know what I mean? It is one of those things that if these companies and developers keep on burning their customers, they're not going to have much of a customer base left. And they'll just move on to someone else.
The Sims, people have gotten so pissed off with the expansion models of The Sims that everyone's just looking. People are looking, saying, like, is there anyone else making a game like it that's not going to be this shitty? And I've forgotten the name of the one coming out. But I think a lot of people are... when you burn your customers that much, because the customers like your game, they enjoy it, or they used to at some point, and they want to keep playing. But they will eventually get pissed off enough. They'll be like, look, can someone else just make a version of this game that's not doing this? And somebody will. Somebody always will. And that's what's happening in a lot of games.
Exactly. And, like, you as a consumer, right, you will make up your mind on how you play a game, right? We've obviously talked about the live service, like launches and patching and like all that stuff today, but like individually, like you're going to pick up a game whether you've paid money or you're free to play one, and you're going to make a decision fairly early on if you like that game, and if you think that developer's worth paying into when it's like live servicey, you're more willing to do that because you think, oh, well, these people are doing it good, and you see that with some companies where they go, hey, here's the game. Here's what we're doing. They give away free content. They give away stuff. And maybe they aren't going to charge you out the ass for cosmetics. Now, just one last thing I do want to bring up is, cosmetics in older games, you unlocked through playing the game, right? That was a thing. Nowadays, people see that as the least egregious way of charging a customer because they're like, what, doesn't affect the gameplay? People, fine, you don't have to get it. But that attitude is dangerous because it can lead to, especially like loot boxes or something like, oh yeah, get some free skins out of this loot box, or get these free skins, get these skins, just give us like 5 to 10 quid. And yeah, okay, I'd prefer it. I'd rather have it as skins than mechanics that are going to make, affect how good I am in the game. But I still think it's a bit shitty. And I don't know what the right balance is. I'm not the right person for that. And I don't even know if there is a right balance. But it would be nice if a lot of these games are like, hey, look, you've got like some unlocks here. We've added more unlocks to the unlocker thing, and maybe the premium stuff you pay for. But hey, we've got like alternate colors and other things like that you can just get just from playing. Just get, and none of this battle pass stuff. None of that. Like just play the game. Just keep playing, and you get a lot of shit. And and that's something that I think some people forget. Like especially in this day and age where we're used to paying for cosmetics, it was never always that way. And I think it kind of sucks that we may have lost that kind of thing. I do see it in some indie games. I do see it in certain titles, but it is not as common as it once was because it's a way to charge people and not get people don't get shitty about it.
Speaking of costume cosmetics, I expect with Metroid Dread we'll be getting to the lava area and say, "Hey, do you want to buy the Varia suit?"
No, it's not going to happen. I hope not, because that is.
Yeah, I was playing Odyssey, and it's interesting that Odyssey has so many skins for Mario, and they're all just part of the game that you buy with the currency, because there's no microtransactions. It's a Mario game. But I was like, it's weird, because none of the old games had these skins. Skins seem like something that gamers just want these days. Yeah. I'm not hugely interested in them, but it's like, let's put in these unlockables, and of course they're all free.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
Sold out completely in that regard.
And that I will get credit where credit's due. A lot of Nintendo's main franchise, they don't do half this bullshit. Pokemon is a different game, and it is bullshit.
We did bring up Pokemon Unite.
Yeah, exactly, and it is bullshit. And I think it should absolutely be called out for that. But like, there is, again, I don't want to get too off topic now, but there is something about having unlockables. I'm a big fan of that stuff. I like unlocking stuff in game that's in the game to be unlocked. I don't want to pay for this shit. And and that is a very old school way of thinking. That's what I grew up. That's what probably all three of us grew up playing stuff. But like hidden levels, shit like that. Where it's like, oh, you found something cool in the game. Hey,
Gen Z, Levi.
Yeah, I know,
So
right? Young boy. But do you guys have any final things you want to bring up? Because I've gone through all the stuff I wanted to talk about.
I've
So,
got
Greg,
one.
anything?
I
Oh,
was
Jack, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to bring up one thing, and that is obviously patching has changed a lot over the years, and I suspect a lot of it is down to technology. So back when I first started, back in the day when I first started gaming,
Yeah.
there used to be, you used to buy CD-ROMs, drives, DVD-ROMs, and you would literally that would be the game. You buy the game and you get a CD, and then in order to patch the game, you generally buy an expansion or a DLC, and then as part of that expansion, you would then get all the patches and all the updates they'd done between making the original game and then the expansion. Starcraft Brood War, Diablo 2, Diablo 2, etc., etc. Now, because it's
Mention it.
so much easier and then more accessible to games because of downloads and platforms such as Steam and Epic Games, patching has almost become it's just so easy to do. So that could be a part of the reason as to why patching on this patch culture is more prolific now than it ever has been, because it's so easy for them to do. All they have to do is just bang, there's an update that's 20 megs, and you just download it. So I think that has inadvertently kind of caused this with by just adding technology. We've kind of ended up in a situation where more people are patching games because it's so easy to do. And most of us don't even think. Most games patch before you even, you don't even realize it. They'll patch whilst your machine's off and all sorts. Especially when you consider consoles as well.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you had any thoughts on that kind of, I guess, transition of technology and how patching has happened.
Greg, do you want to go first?
yeah, I mean, I think I don't necessarily agree that I think it's the main reason. I'm not sure if you're saying that, but I think it's been money led in the sense that developers know now that they can release a product and they'll be able to get it to what they want it to. And so because of like companies are just much bigger, staff bases are much bigger in general, and it's kind of about this company efficiency type thing, which is that like when you're working on a game, and I don't have experiences of launching a game, but when you're working on a game, you're like, if I could just release it and then get the player feedback and then work on it with that feedback, it would be so much easier. And I'm sure it would be a lot more cost effective for these companies to be able to do that. So it's kind of a case of pushing it. It's like, where can we get away with launching the game so that we can keep working on it, keep paying our devs, but it'll just be more efficient because we don't there's always that pressure of release dates for developers. There's always that pressure, and that puts extra pressure on to say maybe we can just push it out the door now and sort of fix it later. And I think that's kind of one of the main reasons. But I'm sure patching infrastructure is part of the reason where we're seeing that. Is that back in the day, I think, I'm talking quite a while ago. Um, there wasn't the internet infrastructure to say, oh, I'm just gonna like chuck the game up on a server, or there'll be Steam. I can just chuck it up on Steam. Indie developers can easily patch their games. Because I've looked into this, obviously being a bit of a developer myself. Like it's an incredibly easy process. Whereas back in the day, unless you're Blizzard, you don't have servers that are hosted that players can easily and quickly connect to. You don't have a login registration system so that people can download your patches. You have to set all that up. So it's just, even if you could technically put the patch on your website, which I think a lot of developers did, it's not like you have a launcher.
Yeah, that's fair. And my part was more it's definitely contributed as opposed to being the
Yeah.
overriding reason. But I think money is definitely going to be a big part of it. If you're obviously paying your devs for a number of years, 5 years in some cases for some product life cycles, and they have to get the game out at some point so that they can start making a return on investment. So I do get it from that standpoint that you do need to release the game as soon as possible to try and get a return on investment. But in the same token, there has to be I guess a happy medium where the game is in a state that it can be launched rather than money being the only object of it, where people are releasing it because they need the money, fine, but in the same token, you have to have a decent product at the end of the day. Otherwise, people are just going to get refunds.
Yeah, well, AAA developers, or rather publishers who are doing this kind of thing, clearly the most often are also the ones who clearly don't need the money in some desperate sense. They're not trying to pay the rent.
Yeah. And I think that's why a lot of games are going towards this game, free to play, but there's content that you purchase, because it is a different way. It's a way of they can make money whilst they work on it.
I've had a little bit of like conflict with this, just thinking about, because I've been thinking about making a whole video about this. Do whales make the game worse for everybody? And there's a whole argument there. Listen, FF14 players, when you go on the MOG station and there's a whale mount, a big technological whale that you can buy for 40 quid, they're taking the piss out of you. And it's meaning that a lot of these things which used to be given away for free, or you able to be earnable, if there's anything super cool the art team come out with, they're like, no, don't give the players that. They'll pay fucking 40 quid for that. That's a thing.
So I'm sat here thinking, I was going to ask you guys at the end, like, do you think patching has made people lazy? But you kind of asked this question anyway, Jack, in terms of like about patching. I'm going to say it comes down to transparency. Back in the day, when I bought console games, as I still do, they would release on a cartridge. That was what was pressed. Now, you could get newer cartridges like version 1.1, where they would fix bugs. But in that case, you had to, like you were saying, you buy the expansion or you buy the newer version. Now that we have the medium of Steam and Epic and all those things, right? I don't think patching is it's not inherently good or bad. It comes down to the transparency of the developer, because if you release a game that is version 1.0, so the release version of the game, is that game firstly going to work, right? Most video games now will have a day one patch, because what's happened is the game's gone gold 2 months ago, and the guys have carried on developing, and they've gone, oh fuck, we've got like another couple gigs here of like, this will fix things, So when you see reviewers, they're like, oh, we played the release version, but like we've not played the like actual release version, and we played the version 1.0, and then you get version 1.1 or whatever comes out on day, you get that experience, and hopefully the best experience. But I think it comes down to transparency, because if you've got a developer that's telling you exactly, like being upfront about, these are the things we're looking to fix, these are the things that are like a hot fix or like a patch that's going on here, this is the content you're getting for free, this is what we're looking at doing, then it's not a bad thing. You're like, okay, so they did make a complete product, this is all stuff they started on now or whatever. If they're not transparent about it, and you're getting patches and stuff, but the game's a bit shoddy on launch, you're like, you could have been a bit more honest about this, and that may affect whether someone's going to stay or not. And for me personally, like, I like it when I get big, in-depth patch things, unless it's just minor fixes, but I like it when you've got a running blog from the developer and they're talking about what they're looking at and doing. And I will give credit to Gearbox. They did this with Borderlands 3. They would do these massive things of like what they were looking at changing, and they would do weekly hot fixes, which was weird, but they would do it, and they'd be like, oh, quickly, all this is, and then you get a big old patch, and then they do like, they were very open about it. And that to me is okay, because I know what they're looking at, I know where they're thinking, and I can be like, okay, so this product was maybe a little bit buggy, but they're like, oh, we're going to fix it in 2 weeks with this big patch, right? When you have that transparency, you're more willing to, I guess, give them a chance, because they're not ignoring it. They're like, look, right, we fucked up, this is what we're looking at doing. That should have been the case with Cyberpunk, it wasn't. But, other developers have done this, where, patching has been a massive, massive boon to them, because you know exactly where they're thinking, you've got the information there, and you're willing to be a bit more lenient. But on the flip side of that, you see this with Fallout 76, Cyberpunk. They're like, oh, we'll fix it later. People are going to buy it, and then we'll fix it later. And that is just shady as fuck. And that is never okay. And that's how I kind of feel with patching. If the information's there, great. If it's not,
that very much goes in line with kind of false advertising and misreputation of product.
Yeah.
I know Cyberpunk got in a lot of trouble for this. And No Man's Sky, I think, was another one where they kind of completely misrepresented what you get. And they're like, you get all these features, you get this, 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 and this. Game gets released, and half of those features aren't even there. Granted, they are now, but you've got to patch the game for 6 months before you get to that state, and that is very unshady. Would be really putting it lightly. I mean, it's illegal essentially, which is
Yeah.
why there's lawsuits on it. Because it is literally you're selling a product that you're not getting on day one, and this is the problem with that kind of patch culture, like buy it now, fix it later, like that you can't do that. It's literally like falsely advertising what you are going to get, which is illegal. So
Yeah.
it's a very dangerous game that some developers are definitely treading, let's put it that way, by this kind of patch culture that we seem to see, unfortunately. And that's not every developer, obviously. It's certain developers do seem to be really pushing the boat out and seeing what they can get away with almost.
Yeah.
Which is
The most
unfortunate.
egregious example of that for me was Warhammer Inquisitor Martyr, where people still to this day, this is what that big argument of what is an open world. And they advertised it as an open world game. It's a series of corridors like a Diablo game. There are no real open world spaces. And they kind of took away some of that, but it's still in the original, it's still on the website, I believe, and things like that. And it's like, you said this was going to be an open world, and it's still on the Steam page the last time I checked. You can't say this is an open world game.
I mean, Warcraft 3 Reforged. Just look at the cutscene stuff that they promised. Oh yeah, we toned it back. Oh, so you're telling people now the game's been launched. All right, cool, yeah, great. Anytime a game
mention. Sorry, go on.
I was say anytime a game developer does that, fuck them. They don't deserve your money. Simple as that.
Before we get too far away from patch notes, because I just wanted to say, obviously you were saying about Gearbox does a really good job. Creative Assembly does a really great job, and the thing I love about it most when developers do this is they explain the philosophy behind the changes. They say why we did this and what the thought process they went through and what they tried in the past and now why they're trying what they're trying. I love hearing all that stuff. I love that.
Yeah, I agree. I think Starcraft 2 devs, again, they come back to Blizzard, did that very well. There's these massive long posts. They're like, this is what we're looking at. This is why we're looking at talking about the meta specifically for the multiplayer. And I agree. I think that is super important because now you know what's going on inside their head. And then you can give feedback a lot of these places.
Yeah.
Transparency is key.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you guys have anything else to say? Because like I said, I'm done now with everything. So
I think this is one of those things that could go on a tangent forever. There's so much to talk about in this type
of thing. It's a good time to wrap it up.
But yeah, I agree. I think we've covered a lot of points, and we've all had some really, really good thoughts, I think, and some really good feedback on patching and the culture of it at the moment.
It's not going away anytime soon.
No, it's definitely not. And we may well cover this again in the future, as things develop, but
we'll make our update to this video.
We'll do our patch notes for this video.
This didn't work. We went on too many tangents. We're trying to keep it more focused this time.
But we're going to tell you because we want to have transparency.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Version 1.2.
Oh, God.
All right, folks. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed our episode. Do check out our channels. So mine's at youtube.com/DonHayes if you want to check out my videos, which are like playthroughs, streams, etc. Killjoy is at the Engineering Bay, and Greg is at Egregious Games. So by all means, check them out. The links will be in the description below if you want to check out their channels. Again, we're all small YouTube channels, really. We're all small YouTubers. So I really want to kind of emphasize that this is a kind of a network as well as a podcast. And, if there's anyone out there who wants to get involved with either this podcast or any of our kind of discussions, please do get in touch with us on Facebook. Again, the link will be in description, but we'd love to hear from you. And yeah, once again, thanks very much for joining, And as always, until the next time, peace.